Boy, the book is called Marketcrafters. I don't even know where they're going to pull that up there, but it's fantastic. Just give us a quick off the top. What do you mean by market crafting? It's not an Etsy. It's what are we talking about here?
So I'm making the case that government and policymakers are often shaping markets to make them work better. So they can shape the markets to make Americans richer, their economic lives more stable, even safer, if they know what they're doing. And so this is a hidden history that we've got to pull on and recover if we're going to rebuild after the chaos of Trump in this moment.
Sir, I have to stop you right there. Are you suggesting that the American economy is not the free market capitalist nirvana that we have been told?
It turns out...
What?
It's RIP, right? No, but I mean, for 40 years, people did believe that markets are self-regulating, that they would mostly take care of themselves, and they always use the I word, intervene. Government is there to intervene in markets.
Only in catastrophes.
Usually, like an emergency room, you know, you would come
Sure.
and you would fix things. But what I see in the history is that when things go well, government is structuring markets to make them work better. So you can take semiconductors, where just a few years ago we weren't making any advanced semiconductors in the United States. Now we're making the cutting-edge chips that are powering the iPhone. You can see it in climate, but you can also see it in financial stability and energy policy. So there are hopeful, inspiring stories, which I think I need more. I think a lot of us need more of in this moment.
Well, because we're out of magnets. We've been out of magnets now.
It's true.
But you go back, it begins in the New Deal. The story begins with a great lesson of how individuals, just this one gentleman hired by Roosevelt, created the housing market in America.
Yeah. Well, I wrote the book to talk a lot about public policy today, but I think to do that well, you got to look at the past to see what worked and what didn't work, because we can learn from the successes. Often we can learn even more from the failures. So in the New Deal, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation was a national investment bank headed by this larger-than-life figure, Jesse Jones, whose story I love telling in the book.
It's fantastic.
He has so many different crazy things. He's a guy who grew up in Tennessee, goes to Houston, makes $1 million by the time he's 30 years old, which is a lot.
Sure.
19 teens. And then he becomes the head of this investment bank, which restructures and supports American finance, but more importantly, gets us out of the Depression by spurring the housing markets that you mentioned, by making direct loans to industry, and then eventually birthing aviation and synthetic rubber. I mean, these industries really matter. They helped us win the war and get us out of the Depression.
In some ways, won us World War II. The reason why I think this book is so timely, but also so crucial, that fiction that government doesn't pick winners and losers has always been used when government is being asked to enlist aid for people.
Right.
When it's asked to intervene on the side of people.
Right.
Politicians, that's socialism. Medicare is it's all socialism. You can't do that. That's not capitalism.
Exactly.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
It is capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, the story of American capitalism is one where we bring the state's power to shape and manage markets. So take financial stability as a clear example. The Federal Reserve is charged with keeping prices stable, keeping people employed, and making sure the financial system doesn't implode.
Right.
It has had a checkered history, but for the most part, has done a pretty good job of delivering on that for investors and the folks who rely on it. And so I think what we need to do is learn from those successes, but think about what we could do on housing policy with a similar kind of institution, or how we could stabilize the price of groceries.
People and not necessarily.
Exactly.
And it's interesting how once they're involved in the levers of power, even the libertarian class become apostles to this new theory, this gentleman Simon.
Yeah. I mean, so Bill Simon was a Treasury Secretary 50 years ago. Libertarian's libertarian. He was honestly the hardest character to write about in the book, because the book is a collection of 12 different stories of individuals, successes and failures. Simon, man, you go into the archives, and this guy was just a total asshole. He was just...
You can tell that in the archive?
Boy, can't you. In the letters, I mean, he just absolutely had no interest in the state working to make markets better until the energy crisis in 1973, and he ends up in the Nixon administration in the chair where he has to figure out, oh, there's an oil embargo and we cannot import any oil from the Middle East. prices are skyrocketing. What are we going to do?
Right.
And he does everything from control prices to make allocation decisions to actually creating a structure to make sure that there's enough home heating oil in New England so no one freezes to death. And the irony of, I did all this research on this guy expecting to write a pretty critical take. He was pretty successful.
Right.
So even libertarians, in fact,
Well, the strategic oil reserve
exactly
is his baby.
Exactly. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve now has hundreds of millions of barrels, and it's there to help us in case there is another kind of oil embargo event, and even, to some extent, buffer the price of stability. So, you know, there are a lot of stories of Republicans believing in the power of marketcraft, but using a different language to justify it. But this is not, there's no partisan claim on the term.
Right. Now, so fast forward to today, certainly Trump has been incredibly impactful on the market, but you use the word planning. I thought planning was a very interesting word to use. Because there appears to be the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, why don't we have that for rare earth metals before we launch a trade war?
Yeah.
This doesn't sound like market crafting in the way that you understand it.
No.
It sounds like dart throwing.
No, I mean, a couple of people have asked me, is Trump a market crafter? And he's the opposite. I mean, he's
Market crasher.
Market crasher, exactly. That would
Great movie with Vince Vaughn.
Exactly.
Market crashers.
No, but I mean, there are ways to think about the problem that critical minerals, 90% of critical minerals come from China. And there would be a way to think about stockpiling those, making public sector investments to mine those minerals here at home. And ironically, J.D. Vance and some other folks in the party were talking about those kinds of ideas as recently as last year. Of course, now they're all loyal soldiers, just following the.
Because he's brilliant. He's the most talented negotiator. Is this a situation where? How do you pull out of something that has already left the station? Do you know of any instances where market crafting was done not in response to an exterior crisis, but to one of our own creation? 2008 comes to mind because, again, it was that sense of like Alan Greenspan saying, I'm sure the banks can regulate themselves. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
And it going south. Is this an instance where an intervention could take place that could remediate or help ease the crisis that we find ourselves in now?
Yeah. I mean, the irony of Greenspan, since you mentioned him, is that he's got a rap as a deregulator, and he did do all kinds of deregulation. The guy was also singularly obsessed with financial innovation. He genuinely believed that if we created these credit default swaps and the special purpose vehicles and all of these elaborate, complex machinations, the financial system would be safer. And yet, as we got, obviously, to 2008, turns out that wasn't the case.
No.
And when they allowed Lehman to just explode, it was part of this whole framework of like, well, what can we do? We need some company just to go bankrupt so everybody learns a lesson.
Right.
When in reality, there's a long history of threading the needle. Just 10 years before, the largest hedge fund in the world had also gone bankrupt. But there was a parachute, and there was a way that wasn't creating a bomb in the financial system that allowed that institution to proceed through its bankruptcy proceedings in a way that, the free market fantasy did not allow for Lehman. So there was a better way, and we can learn from that.
Why do they, in those situations, though, always, even the debate over whether or not to save Lehman or do what they did with Bear Stearns, and save those guys, or dump a shit ton of liquidity and capital into AIG, but they did it all at the corporate level. Why is there no policy wedge to do the same thing for all the homeowners who got foreclosed on, not because of the terrible doings of Lehman and Bear Stearns and AIG? Why don't they put capital into those markets?
I think the simple answer is because we didn't have the institutions of marketcraft to do that. We had an institution of financial stability marketcraft, go save those banks, but we had no institution in housing markets that could make it cheaper. Well, these days, to make it cheaper to borrow. In the housing crisis moment of 2008, 2009, it would have been about relief for people who'd already borrowed and couldn't make their
or even brought
bills.
Their mortgages up to sea level so that there wasn't this default crisis.
Right. So we've decided that finance should be stabilized, but housing shouldn't.
Right.
That makes no sense.
Right.
What we need is a housing construction fund to make it cheaper to build multifamily developer housing. We need an industrial policy for modular housing, the kind of homes that are built off-site and then you bring them in and an apartment building can go up within 7 days. We can do this. We have the ideas, but we have to create the institutional reality to get it done.
But this, to me, this is project, and I'm going to get the years wrong, I'm sure, 2029 for Democrats. There is no reason why Republicans and Democrats now agree that the state can intervene on behalf of capitalism. Now it's just a question or shape it. We're negotiating now what to do it for. The Democrat plan should be market crafting for the real needs of people through childcare, elder care, education, healthcare. The shit that markets won't properly regulate.
Yeah, bring down costs. I mean, Americans have been saying this for years. It was through the...
Come on!
Yeah, exactly.
And then they have the nerve to make us want to celebrate being able to negotiate the price of 10 drugs. Like, it's insane to me that we haven't created that market craft in pharmaceuticals.
Absolutely. That's totally right. But let's also not forget that the tariffs are projected, of this administration, are projected to raise prices anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 for each year.
Oh, I thought
for the average American family.
Each pill. I was going to be like, oh.
That would be very expensive. But my point is absolutely we should be able to get drug prices down. We know how to do that. That's a political problem to get that done. We have made some headway in the IRA. We got a lot more to do, but at the same time, I think we got to be very focused on communicating that Trumponomics is about raising costs for Americans. That is very clear, and it's going to push us straight into a recession. The only thing that's worse than inflation, unemployment. And that's straight around the corner, and we have to have an agenda to rebuild after that.
And it also, to the utter antithesis of everything that you lay out in this book over these last 100 years, there is no infrastructure behind this. It is an economic policy by fiat, by whim. And it is, I'm going to raise them 130% today on the tariffs. But there's nothing, no strategy underlying it.
Yeah, I mean, we could do, I mean, there is a way in some cases to do tariff policy.
I'm sure.
You know, smartly. You'd want to have it be targeted and say, hey, we don't want China to dump their EVs in our market. Something like that. You'd want to do it with Great Britain, the European Union, your allies to do it well. And then you'd also want to pair it with public investment because you don't want to just make things expensive. You want to speed up the production here at home. There's a way to do that, to think about it. And Bidenomics has gotten a bad rap in a lot of cases. But those ingredients were there with a lot of the core elements around climate policy, chips and semiconductors, and Lena Khan's work at the FTC.
She's fantastic. And you see it now even when they say, oh, Apple has decided they're going to move all of their factories. They're going to move them out of China. And you think, oh, my God, the tariffs have worked. And then they're like, to India. They're not moving them here. So this is a shell game that corporations, they'll wait this out because there's nothing underlying it.
Yeah, I mean, literally, the boats that are coming from China are at half capacity right now because the companies are waiting to ship to see what actually happens. So there's an agility in these supply chains, which I think is important to realize. And so, I mean, but again, the question is, what are we going to do on the other side of this? Like, obviously, we have to criticize what's happening right now.
Sure.
But all the time that we're doing that, we're not developing this positive agenda for the future, and at least the latter is mostly what I'm focused on.
And this is kind of a really nice framework to start out there. I also have to, so you haven't obviously been at Facebook in a very long time, but I'm still sure you're probably a pretty keen observer of the technocrats and all the guys from that world. Has anything that has happened since Trump took office surprised you in terms of the sort of libertarian, the Mark Zuckerberg going, what do you want, $25 million? I'll never do anything again. Has their obsequiousness surprised you in any way? Is there anything about what's happening in that world?
I was a little surprised he didn't get a deal. Mark visited the White House 2-3 times in search of a deal. And
what kind of deal, or what would they get?
Well, the FTC has sued to break up Facebook. So as you know, I talked about this in an article 6 years ago.
Sure,
the FTC
I read
filed.
that.
I'm glad you did.
That was a good one.
The FTC filed, I thought so. The FTC filed suit a year later, and it's taken forever to wind through the courts. But Mark Zuckerberg was on the stand for, not last week, but the week before, virtually every day. and the Trump FTC is prosecuting the case to separate Instagram and WhatsApp from Facebook. That's the agenda. And who knows it? Google's been declared a monopoly twice in the past 8 months. So,
but he doesn't like Google. So some of this is maybe they haven't proven their loyalty enough. I think he enjoys humiliating Zuckerberg. I think he thinks Google was working against him because Tim Cook and Apple got a great deal.
I know, but I do think something has changed. It's not so much about Trump, but I think in the world of antitrust and anti-monopoly, there's been a big shift. Because the guy who's running the FTC now, I think it's really interesting that he kept some of the merger guidelines from the Lina Khan time. They also actually filed suit against the FTC filed suit against Uber last week for misleading customers. So
what?
Can you believe it? Uber. But my point is like there is still this sense that markets need to be competitive if they're going to work in a way that's in line with the long-term history of American capitalism. And I think that's a big shift in antitrust and anti-monopoly. It doesn't have anything to do with Trump, so I'm not giving him any credit for it. But it has a lot more to do with Lina Khan and a new, more emergent set of approaches to antitrust that's more in keeping with this.
And there is, listen, Lina Khan had fans on the right. J.D. Vance was a fan of hers. Josh Hawley was a fan of hers. So
almost a dozen Republican senators voted for her confirmation.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Thank you very much for being on Marketcrafters.
Thank you for having me.
I got to tell you, it's available now. Chris Hughes.